The last thing Renee had in her wallet that Tuesday night was $43. She knew the exact amount because she had counted it twice on the bus, sitting under the flickering overhead light with her coat pulled tight and her grocery bag balanced on her knees. $43. It was supposed to last her until Friday, when the second part of her paycheck would clear. Rent was paid. The electric bill was not. She had already called the utility company and arranged a grace period, the kind of arrangement that required a calm voice and a careful explanation, and still left a knot in her chest for days afterward. $43 for 3 days. She had been feeding herself on rice and canned goods from the back of the pantry all week, and she had told her daughter Brianna that they were having a cooking adventure, that Tuesday was International Rice Night. And Brianna, who was 9 and deeply earnest, had asked what country they were adventuring to, and Renee had said, the good kind. She thought about that the whole ride in, the good kind. The $43 did not include the cost of the diner. She had told herself she would just have coffee. The diner on Clement Street was warm, though, and warm was something she had not had in 2 days, because she was rationing the heat. And she was tired in the particular way that settles into a person's back and shoulders, and does not leave, the kind of tired that comes from working 31 hours across 3 days, while keeping a face on for a child. She pushed open the diner door and slid into a booth by the window, and she did not know, when a young man came to take her order with red eyes and a name badge that said Marcus, that the $43 in her coat pocket was about to change both of their lives. She had not planned on ordering food. She ordered the soup because it was $4.95, which still left her with nearly $38, and because Marcus had brought it over without her asking when she sat down, setting it in front of her with a warm roll on the side, saying it was cold out, and she looked like she could use something warm, and she had been so caught off guard, the simple kindness that she had not found the words to refuse. She noticed his eyes right away. The redness was not the kind from tiredness. It was the other kind. The kind a person gets from news they have not finished absorbing yet. The kind that sits just behind the surface of a face and shows through no matter how composed a person tries to be. She did not ask him anything. She ate the soup and watched the rain start up against the window glass and ordered a second cup of coffee when he came back, partly because it was $1.25 and partly because she was not ready to go back out into that rain yet. Marcus refilled her water without being asked. He cleared the empty soup bowl with a care that suggested he was operating on muscle memory, and that his mind was elsewhere, somewhere far away, and she recognized that in a person immediately, because she had felt it herself plenty of times, the body going through the motions while the heart is in a different city altogether. The diner was mostly empty. A couple near the back. A man at the counter eating pie alone. The kitchen radio playing something slow and gospel-tinged that nobody seemed to mind. When Marcus brought her check, he set it down with both hands, carefully, and he said, "Have a good night," and his voice cracked slightly on the last word, and he turned away fast. Renee sat for a moment with the check in front of her. $4.95 for the soup, $2.50 for the coffee. Total, $7.45. She opened her wallet. She held the $43 in her hand and felt all 3 days of it. The weight of Friday. The quiet of the apartment with the heat turned low. Brianna's question about what country Rice Night was from. And then she thought about eyes that read and a voice that cracked on good night. And she took out a $20 bill and she laid it on top of the check. She put her coat on. She walked to the door. She stepped back out into the rain. She had $23 until Friday. She had no idea what that $20 was about to do. Marcus Webb had been on his feet since 6 in the morning. He had not slept the night before, or not really slept. Just drifted in and out of a thin, half-conscious state in the break room chair after his shift at the warehouse ended and before his shift at the diner began. The warehouse was a distribution center on the east side, boxes loaded and sorted and moved from one place to another in a rhythm that a person's body learned without the mind needing to participate, which was useful on days like this one. He was 24 years old, and he was working 2 jobs and living in a room he rented from an older couple on Fulton Street, a Mr. and Mrs. Ademi, who kept the common areas very clean and left a small plate of cookies on the kitchen counter on Sundays, which was the kind of quiet generosity that Marcus had stopped finding surprising, because his mother had raised him to look for it. He sent money home to Baton Rouge every month without fail. $40 here, $60 there. Whatever he could carve out of what was left after his rent and his bus pass and food. It was never enough to feel like enough, but it arrived on time. And arriving on time was the thing his mother had always said mattered most about any commitment a person made. His mother's name was Dottie. She had raised him alone after his father when Marcus was 7, raised him in a 2-bedroom house on a street where half the neighbours kept their porch lights on all night because they felt safer that way. She had worked at the county hospital as a dietary aide for 22 years, feeding patients who could not feed themselves, learning which ones needed their Jell-O cups opened, and which ones preferred their trays arranged a certain way, learning which patients wanted to be spoken to, and which ones needed quiet, and a hand set gently on the bed rail instead. She treated every person in that building like they were her own. She had retired 18 months ago, and the hospital had given her a small party in the 3rd-floor break room with a sheet cake and a card signed by 67 people, which Marcus knew because Paulette had called him and described each signature. She had been sick for 2 years before the retirement, quietly sick, the kind of sick she mentioned to Marcus in a careful voice so as not to worry him, and the kind he'd spent 2 years worrying about anyway. She did not make him feel guilty about being so far away. She told him regularly that being far away was exactly what a young man with ambition was supposed to be. She called him every Sunday morning at 9. He could set a clock by it. She called him every Sunday morning at 9 and asked him what he had eaten for dinner, and whether he was getting outside enough, and whether he had made any friends, and he always said yes to all 3, even when the honest answer to 1 or 2 was no, and she pretended to believe him, because that was the arrangement they had worked out, and it suited them both. She had not called the Sunday before last. His Aunt Paulette had called instead, at 7 in the morning, before the Sunday 9 had even arrived, and that had told him everything before she said a single word. He had taken the call in the break room at the warehouse, and he had sat down on a plastic chair, and his aunt had said the words he had been bracing for since the careful voice began, and he had said, "Okay," and "Yes, and I understand," and when she hung up, he had sat there for another 15 minutes, looking at the wall and thinking about Sunday mornings at 9. His mother was in the hospital. She was not expected to last more than another week or so, his aunt said. It was time to come home if he was going to come. Marcus had looked at his bank account that afternoon. He had $41 and some change. A bus ticket to Baton Rouge was $63. He was 3 days from payday. He had asked his supervisor at the warehouse if he could get an advance, and the supervisor had told him the company did not do advances, said it with a kind of flat sympathy that meant he had been asked before, and the answer was always no. He had asked the diner manager, Cora, if she could front him anything, and she had looked genuinely pained and said she couldn't, not with the slow week they'd had, but that she was sorry, and he could tell she meant it. He had called his aunt back and told he was working on it. He had 2 shifts left before his warehouse payday. He had ridden the bus to the diner that Tuesday night with $41, and the knowledge that he would not make it home before his mother was gone. That was what was behind his eyes when Renee sat down in booth 4 and ordered the soup. He counted the money from booth 4 after the woman in the dark coat left. He was in the habit of collecting and sorting his tables at the end of each rotation, tucking the bills and sliding everything into his apron pocket without looking, saving the accounting for the end of the night when he could sit for 5 minutes in the back. He did not look at the check slip until close, just before midnight when Cora told him he could go. He sat down on the step behind the back door with his phone and his apron pocket, and he started going through the night. Most of it was what it was, a few 5s, a handful of 1s, 2 tables that tipped nothing, and a regular named Gus, who always left exactly 15% to the penny. He pulled out the receipt from booth 4. He unfolded it. He saw the $7.45 total and the $20 bill folded underneath it, and for a moment he just looked at it. A $12.55 tip on a $7.45 check. He thought about the woman. The way she had come in with her coat pulled close and her shoulders carrying something. The way she had drunk both cups of coffee slowly, like she was warming from the inside out. The way she had not asked him anything, had not tried to pry into what was behind his eyes, had just let him do his job and said thank you each time and left quietly. He looked at the 20 again. He thought about Dottie. He thought about $63. He pulled out his phone and opened the bus booking app. He had $41. He had $12.55 from tonight. He had a 5 from Gus's table and 3 ones from the couple in back. That was $61.55. He was $1.45 short. He checked his jacket pocket and found a crumpled single and 2 quarters. He sat on the step behind the diner with the rain coming down and the kitchen fan humming above him, and he booked the 6:15 bus to Baton Rouge for the following morning. He sat there another few minutes in the rain. He had not cried in front of anyone all day. He cried a little then, alone, on the step, with his phone in his hand and the booking confirmation on the screen. Marcus arrived at his mother's house the following evening. The bus had taken 11 hours with a transfer in Lake Charles and a 40-minute delay at the station. While a mechanical issue was resolved, he had sat in the grey plastic terminal chairs with his bag between his feet and watched the clock on the wall and thought about nothing except moving forward. His Aunt Paulette met him at the door of the house on Larkin Street and held him for a long moment without saying anything, the kind of embrace that does not need words and would not have been helped by them. The house smelled like his childhood: coffee, and a specific laundry detergent, and the lemon cleaning spray his mother had always used on the kitchen counters. The living room was the same. The framed photographs on the wall above the television were the same. A school picture of Marcus at 10, earnest and missing a tooth. A portrait of Dottie and Paulette and their mother, taken at a church event 20 years before, all 3 of them, in their Sunday clothes. The throw on the couch that Dottie had crocheted herself over 3 separate winters, the squares uneven in the way of something made by hand, which Marcus had always loved about it. Paulette had set a glass of water on the kitchen table for him and made him sit down for 10 minutes and drink it before she took him back. She had the practical kindness of a woman who had been managing other people's grief alongside her own for 3 days, and it showed. She told him Dottie had been asking for him, not in an urgent way, she said, more in the way she asked about most things she cared about, patient, steady, as if she was certain the answer would arrive eventually and was simply waiting. That sounded exactly right to Marcus. Dottie was in her bed in the back room. She had a hospital bed now, one of the adjustable ones that had been arranged by a home health organization, positioned so she could see the window that looked out onto the small backyard, where she had kept a garden for as long as Marcus could remember. Tomatoes in summer, collard greens and marigolds. A pepper plant that came back every 2 or 3 years and surprised her when it did. He sat down beside her and she turned her head toward him, and her face did something that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. A slow and certain recognition, the particular softening of a mother's face when she sees the thing she was waiting for. She said his name. Just his name, Marcus, in a voice that was thinner than he remembered, and he took her hand and he said, "I'm here, Mama, I'm here." She did not say anything else for a while. She did not need to. He sat there and held her hand and looked at the window and the dark square of backyard beyond it, and he was glad that the last thing she had planted was still out there, even in February, even just the turned-over earth of it, the outline of where it had been and where it would be again in the spring. He stayed for 3 days. Dottie died on the second morning, just before dawn, with Marcus holding her hand and Paulette on the other side of the bed, and the window beginning to go grey with the earliest suggestion of light. It was peaceful. That word would not feel adequate to Marcus for a long time afterward, but it was the true word. Peaceful. He had made it. He had been there. He had not missed her last night or her last morning, or the quiet hour she had when she opened her eyes one final time and saw her son beside her and smiled. He would not have been there at all. Not on that morning, not in that chair, not holding that hand, if a woman in a dark coat had not left a $20 bill on a 7:45. Check at a diner on Clement Street on a Tuesday in January. He did not know her name. He did not know anything about her. He knew she had come in out of the rain and had been cold and had drunk 2 cups of coffee and had let him do his job without asking him anything. He knew that was all she knew, too. He carried that with him on the bus home. He thought about it for a long time. Renee counted her $23 on Wednesday morning and made a plan. She had half a bag of rice, a can of black beans, an onion, and 3 eggs. Brianna liked eggs. She could stretch the beans and rice through Thursday. Friday's paycheck would cover the electric bill and leave her enough for groceries, real groceries, the kind that included fruit. She had learned to see the distance between now and a paycheck, the way a long-distance driver sees the stretch of road ahead. Just this mile, then the next. She was not defeated by it. She was practiced at it, which was a different thing, and one she had never chosen to be proud of, but one she had decided, somewhere along the way, to be steady about. She worked the morning shift at a commercial laundry facility on Wednesdays, folding linens from 3 hotel accounts, 8 hours of warm rooms and the clean industrial smell of detergent, and the occasional satisfaction of a perfectly crisp pillowcase edge. She had been doing the work long enough to find the small pleasures in it, the rhythm of the fold, the neat stack, the way a queen-size sheet, handled correctly and with enough momentum, settles into its rectangle with a clean, flat snap. She liked the women she worked with. Her supervisor, a woman named Faye, was direct and fair and had once covered for Renee when Brianna had a fever and Renee needed to leave an hour early, without it coming off her time. Faye had done it without being asked, just said, "Go, I've got it," in the particular tone that means no thanks is expected and none should be offered. Renee had said it anyway. Faye had waved her hand. She had a standing arrangement with a neighbour, Mrs. Cho, to collect Brianna from the school bus on the days Renee worked late. Mrs. Cho was 71 and kept butterscotch candies in a dish by her door and called Brianna Little Bright Thing, which Brianna accepted as her due. She would come home from Mrs. Cho's with a butterscotch in each cheek and homework already done, because Mrs. Cho believed in homework the way some people believed in early bedtimes, as a moral position, and Brianna had absorbed this without complaint. Renee's life ran on a scaffolding of small mutual arrangements like this, people doing for each other in the ways as money couldn't always cover, and she trusted those arrangements the way other people trusted banks. She did not tell anyone about the $20. She had not thought about it much after leaving the diner. She had felt the rightness of it while she was doing it, and then she had walked home in the rain and warmed some water on the stove because the heat was still low, and she had gone to bed. The money was gone. She did not have a habit of mourning money that had already been spent on the right thing. February came in and settled. Colder than January had been, the particular cold that parks itself and refuses to negotiate. The heat was no longer rationed. The electric bill had been paid on Friday, as promised, and Renee had turned the thermostat up to 68 and stood in the kitchen for a moment, when the heat clicked on and felt the warmth come through the floor vents, small, real. She had $29 in her wallet instead of 23, and Friday was the day after tomorrow instead of 3 days away. The coat drive at Brianna's school had been Renee's idea in the first place, suggested at a parent meeting in November, and she had brought in last year's jacket, the one with the broken zipper pull she had been meaning to fix, and Brianna had come home with a story about how a girl in her class had seen the jacket and said it was the best one in the whole pile, and Renee had sat with that for a while. Better. She was better. She knew how to count the small differences. 3 weeks after Dottie's funeral, Marcus Webb walked back into the diner on Clement Street. He had not worked a shift there since the night he booked the bus. Cora had given him bereavement time, more than the standard because she was that kind of person, and he had used all of it. He had cleaned out his mother's kitchen and helped Paulette sort through the clothes and driven Dottie's old car to a nephew who needed it more than the estate did. He had sat on the back porch of the house on that street, with the porch lights on, and he had tried to feel grateful rather than just emptied out, and sometimes he succeeded. He came back to work on a Wednesday. He put on his apron. He refilled the salt shakers and the sugar dispensers, and he got back to it, because that was what there was to do. He had not seen the woman from booth 4 since that Tuesday night. He had thought about her sometimes. The way you think about a person who is kind to you during the worst week of your life, the wondering about who they are when they are not sitting across from a stranger, the wondering if they know what they did. He did not expect to see her again. Cora, who noticed most things, had told him one afternoon that a woman matching his description had come in a few times in the weeks he was gone, always sat in booth 4, always had the soup and coffee. He stood by the counter for a moment after Cora told him that. He asked if she had paid full price. Cora said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Never mind," and he went to check table 7. He started watching for her. He did not know why exactly, except that sometimes a debt of a certain kind does not go away by just feeling it. Sometimes it has to be said out loud to the right person, even if saying it out loud is all you are able to do. Renee came in on a Thursday in February. It was still cold, colder than January had been, the kind of February that parks itself and refuses to move. She came in after her laundry shift, still carrying the faint smell of detergent, and her shoulders still a little loose from the warmth of the facility. And she sat down in booth 4 because it was her booth now, or it had become that. The way certain seats in certain places become a person's over time without any formal arrangement. She ordered the soup. She was doing better on money in February. The electric bill was paid, and Brianna's school had a coat drive, and Renee had been able to donate last year's jacket, the one with the broken zipper pull she had been meaning to fix. And Brianna had come home with a story about how a girl in her class had seen the jacket and said it was the best one in the whole pile. And Renee had sat with that for a while. Better. She was better. She had $29 in her wallet instead of 23, and Friday was the day after tomorrow instead of 3 days away. Small differences. She knew how to count them. She did not see Marcus right away. She was looking out the window at the street and thinking about nothing particular when a voice said, "I'm sorry to bother you." And she looked up and found a young man standing at the edge of her booth, not with a pad and pen, just standing, and she recognized the eyes immediately, even though the redness was gone. They were clear now, and still, and looking at her with something she could not immediately name. He said, "You were in here a few weeks ago. Tuesday night, January." He said, "I was your waiter." She said she remembered him. He said, "You left a 20 on a 7:45 check." He said it the way a person states a fact they have gone over many times in private. She said she had. He sat down across from her, not in the smooth, practiced way of someone comfortable at it, but carefully, like he was asking permission from the seat. He said, "I need to tell you something." He told her about the $63 bus ticket. He told her about his bank account with $41 in it and 3 days until payday. He told her about his mother, Dottie, the woman who had worked 22 years feeding hospital patients and who had kept a garden in her backyard and who had called every Sunday at 9. He told her about sitting on the step behind the diner in the rain with his phone and counting $12.55 plus 41 plus a crumpled single and 2 quarters, and coming up $1.45 short and then going back into his jacket pocket. He told her about Paulette opening the door. He told her about his mother's face when she saw him. He told her his mother had died the next morning, the second morning before dawn, and that he had been holding her hand. He said all of this in a low, steady voice, looking at the table mostly, then at Renee, then at the table again. When he finished, there was quiet for a moment. The kitchen radio was playing something low. The couple in the back corner murmured at their menus. Renee had not moved while he was speaking. She sat with both hands around her coffee cup, and she listened the way she had always known how to listen, fully, without preparing her response, just taking in what was being said. She felt the shape of it settle over her. A $20 bill, a bus ticket by $1.50, a woman dying just before dawn with her son beside her. She had not known any of that when she put the bill down. She had known only that his voice had cracked on good night, and that kindness cost her $20 she did not strictly have, and that the feeling she had walking out into the rain had been right. She understood now that right had been an understatement. Marcus said, "I didn't know how to find you to tell you. I just wanted you to know." He said, "I don't know your name." She said, "Renee." He said, "I'm Marcus." She said, "I know. Your badge." He almost smiled at that. The thing about a moment like that is there is no script for it. You cannot plan what it will feel like when someone tells you that a choice you made in the dark, with no information and no promise of return, was the exact thing that put them in the right chair at the right time for something that cannot be undone. Renee did not cry right away. She felt the fullness of it gather somewhere behind her breastbone, the way a particular kind of grace does, the kind that arrives late and sideways and does not announce itself. She thought about $43. She thought about 23. She thought about Brianna asking what country Rice Night was from. She had done the thing because it was the right thing, and she had not known what it was. She had not known anything about Dottie or Baton Rouge, or the porch lights on, or the garden out the back window, or the hand held in the grey. Of the morning she had only known that a young man's voice had cracked on good night, and that she had something to give. If you have ever stopped yourself from giving because you thought you didn't have enough, or because you told yourself someone else would do it, or because the math didn't work out, and the wallet was almost empty, then you know something about the choice Renee made that Tuesday. And if you have wondered whether it matters, whether one small thing done quietly without anyone watching adds up to anything real, this story is the answer. Renee reached across the table and she put her hand over Marcus's hand. For just a moment she said, "I'm glad you made it." He said, "I am too." She picked up her coffee. He went back to work. The diner kept going, warm and ordinary and full of the small transactions that hold a life together. And neither of them said much more, because there was not much more that needed to be said. Marcus did not stop working 2 jobs right away. The circumstances of his life did not change because a story had been told. He still rode the bus. He still rented the room on Fulton Street. He still sent money back to Paulette when Paulette needed it, which was less often now that the hospital bills had been settled and the house was sold to a family with small children who were already, Paulette reported, fighting over who got the back bedroom with the window over the garden. What changed was quieter and harder to put into words. He had spent a month and a half moving through his grief in the way a person moves through. Deep water, each step requiring more than it should, the ordinary world feeling slightly distant, slightly muffled. After the Thursday in February, something in that lifted. Not the grief itself, which would take the time it needed and could not be hurried. A different thing. He had been carrying the story of that Tuesday in January as a private debt, something unresolved, the way an open account feels different from a closed one. Sitting in booth 4 and saying it out loud to the woman who had made it possible changed. The weight of it. Not lightened it, changed it. He understood after that Thursday that his mother had died with her son beside her, and that was a complete thing, a whole thing, finished and real and not undone by anything. He could hold that. He started calling Paulette on Sunday mornings at 9. He did not plan to. He picked up his phone on the first Sunday after the Thursday and found himself dialing, and it came out naturally, the way certain habits pass from one person to another without instruction. Paulette answered on the second ring and said, "Well," and he said, "Just checking in," and she said, "Your mama would have liked that." He thought she was right. Renee found out about the job posting through Faye at the laundry, 6 weeks after the Thursday in the diner. Faye had a cousin who worked in facilities management at a hospital a few miles north, and the hospital was hiring for a lead linen services coordinator, which was a supervisory role over a team of 12 and paid $47,000 a year with benefits, which was $17,000 more than Renee made at the laundry, and came with health insurance for Brianna, who needed her inhaler refilled every 3 months, and whose paediatrician visits Renee had been managing on a sliding fee at a community health clinic. Renee applied. She prepared for the interview the way she prepared for everything important, thoroughly and without drama, writing down her questions the night before, pressing her one good blazer, leaving 20 minutes earlier than she needed to so she would not arrive flustered. She got the job. The hiring manager called her on a Thursday afternoon, which had become, in the private ledger of her own mind, a good day of the week. She sat on the edge of her bed after the call and was quiet for a moment. She called Brianna's name, and Brianna came in from the other room, eating a tangerine section by section the way she always did, and Renee said, "We're going to be okay," in a plain and direct way, and Brianna said, "Okay," and went back to her tangerine, and Renee laughed for the first time in a while, a real laugh, the kind that comes from the chest. She started the hospital job in April. On her first day, she walked through the service entrance and was given a key card and a locker assignment and a name badge with her name printed in clean block letters, and she clipped it to her blazer and she went to meet her team. The hospital had 4 floors and a cafeteria that served breakfast from 6 to 10, and the hallways smelled of the particular combination of cleaner and recycled air that every hospital smells of, which Renee did not mind, because she had never been a person who minded the smell of a place where people were being helped. She was good at the job. She was good at it from the first week, because she had spent years knowing the exact cost of every supply and the exact value of every hour, and those are the things that make a person good at managing both. She found out 3 months in, entirely by accident, through a scheduling conversation with a nurse on the 3rd floor, that the hospital had once had a dietary aid program, a small one, retired now, and that one of the aides who had worked it for over 2 decades had retired 18 months ago from a county hospital in Louisiana. She found that out on a Wednesday, and she sat with it for 2 days. It did not add up to anything she could verify. The world was full of retired dietary aides. It was too small a thread to be a fact. She kept it anyway. The way you keep something that arrives late and sideways and does not announce itself. The way you keep the things you are not entirely sure you are meant to understand yet. 1 year after the Tuesday in January, Renee sat in booth 4 of the diner on Clement Street and ordered the soup and the coffee and waited. Marcus had texted her the week before. They had not kept regular contact. Just the kind of loose occasional thread you keep, with a person who crossed your life at a hinge point, a message here, a holiday note. He had texted to say he had something to tell her, which made her curious in the way she had learned to be curious, without expectations, just open. He came in on its break from a new job, a hospital administrator's office, 2 miles away, where he had taken a position as a records coordinator after finishing a certificate program at the community college. He sat down across from her, and he was different in the way people are different after a hard year has finished settling, not unmarked by it, but settled. He looked like himself. He ordered coffee. He said, "I wanted to tell you something." She said, "You say that a lot." He said he knew. He told her about the new job. He told her it was in a hospital records office, that he dealt sometimes with the dietary services department on archiving questions, and that the previous month he had been cross-filing some retirement records and had come across a service file for a dietary aide who had worked at a county hospital in Louisiana for 22 years before retiring 18 months ago, a woman who had transferred briefly into a visiting care coordination program in her last year of work, and that the coordination program had a sister program at the hospital 2 miles from the diner on Clement Street. He said the transfer file had a contact phone number. He stopped talking. He looked at her. He said her name was Dottie Webb. He said, "The contact number in the file was the number for the dietary services desk at your hospital." Renee set down her coffee cup. She felt the fullness gather, not behind her breastbone this time, but everywhere, the way something does when it is finally complete. She had not known. She had not known any of it. Dottie had not known. Marcus had not known. A woman who fed hospital patients for 22 years had a care coordination number that routed through one institutional transfer to the hospital where that woman's son had been sitting across from the woman who had paid for his bus ticket, in a diner 2 miles away, for the past year. Nobody had drawn the connection. It had just been there waiting. Renee said quietly, "Your mother had a connection to my hospital." Marcus said, yes. He said it the way a person says yes, when they have already spent time sitting with the answer and have accepted that the world is larger and more deliberate than it appears. They sat for a while without speaking. Outside the window, the street was bright, the first real warm day of a new year coming in. The kitchen radio played something slow, and neither of them turned to listen, and neither of them. He had a mother who left a long thread in the world. She did not know she was leaving. She had picked it up without knowing what it was. Here they were, a year later, sitting in the same booth, warm, both of them, both of their lives changed and continuing. The soup was good. The coffee was hot. There are people in the world who will never know that the small thing they did quietly, with no expectation and no audience and no calculation, is the thing someone else's whole life turned on. Renee was one of them for 365 days. Marcus laid down the thread of what he had found, gently, the way you lay down something you have been careful with, and she picked it up and held it. She did not need to say much. She looked at him and she said, "Your mama sounds like she was something." He said, "She was everything." Renee reached into her coat pocket. She did not have $43 anymore. She had a paycheck, a real one, and a daughter who had a new inhaler, and a pediatrician she saw on a regular schedule, and a coat from a coat drive that a girl in her class had, called the best one in the whole pile. She left a 20 on the check. Old habit, good habit, the kind that keeps.